The silence was the only weapon she had left, and it was the one they misunderstood the most. They saw a woman past her prime, her face a roadmap of years they could not comprehend, etched with lines that spoke of sun and wind and sleepless nights. They saw the gray threading her tightly bound hair and the deliberate, almost weary way she moved. They saw Elara Vance, a name on a roster, a last-minute addition to a mandatory refresher course for pilots who had spent too much time behind a desk. They saw a relic. They were wrong. At Fort Holloman, the air was thick with the arrogance of youth and the smell of jet fuel. The sun beat down on the cracked tarmac, turning the world into a shimmering mirage of heat and dust. Inside Hangar 4, the air was cooler, but the atmosphere was just as oppressive. A dozen pilots, all men, all 20 years or junior, lounged with the casual confidence of those who had never truly been tested. They were lieutenants and captains, their flight suits crisp, their laughter loud and dismissive as they spoke of G-forces and kill ratios. Elara sat apart, on a simple metal bench, her back straight, her hands resting on her knees. She observed. She listened. The lead instructor, a barrel-chested master sergeant named Griggs, swaggered through the room, his voice a gravelly bark that demanded attention. "All right, ladies," he began, his eyes sweeping the room before landing on Elara with a dismissive smirk. The joke was old, but the younger men chuckled on cue. "Welcome to the boneyard. This is where we see if you desk jockeys remember which end of the stick makes the bird go up." He paced before a row of 6 advanced flight simulators, behemoths of steel and wiring that mimic the cockpit of the F-35 Lightning II. "Most of you are here to get your flight hours recertified. Don't get any bright ideas. We're not looking for heroes. Just try not to virtually crash a $200 million piece of hardware." His gaze fell on Elara again. "Vance, you're last on the list. You can watch and learn." The implication was clear. She would need the help. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. She did not mind being last. It gave her more time to observe the machine. She had always believed that every machine had a spirit, a rhythm. From the hum of a server farm to the deep-throated roar of a turbine engine, there was a language to be learned. She watched the technicians perform their final checks, her eyes tracing the lines of conduit and the flicker of the diagnostic screens. She knew these simulators. Not these specific ones, but their ancestors, the ones built in secret labs, the ones that ran scenarios so brutal they were designed to break a pilot's psyche. Lieutenant Reyes, a handsome, cocky pilot with a jawline that seemed engineered for recruitment posters, was first. He strode to Simulator 1 with a swagger, flashing a grin at his friends. "Watch this, boys." Thomas set a new record. Griggs clapped him on the shoulder. "Give him hell, Reyes." Elara watched the main monitor as Reyes's simulation began. The scenario was a complex one, a high-threat air-to-air engagement over a hostile mountain range. Multiple bogies, advanced surface-to-air missile sites, and electronic warfare jamming. It was designed to overwhelm. Reyes flew with aggression, a flurry of high-G turns and missile launches. He was skilled, but predictable. He relied on the aircraft's power, not its subtlety. Within 90 seconds, a simulated missile-lock tone shrieked through the hangar speakers. A moment later, a female computerized voice announced flatly, "Eject, eject, eject." Aircraft lost. Reyes emerged from the simulator, his face flushed with anger. "That's garbage." The SAM lock came out of nowhere. "The system's bug." Griggs shook his head, a look of disappointment on his face. "The system is fine, Lieutenant. Your situational awareness is not. You flew right into the engagement envelope." Next, one by one, the pilots went in. One by one, they failed. They cursed the difficulty, the unfairness of the scenario, the impossible odds. The hangar, once filled with boisterous confidence, grew quiet and tense. Colonel Madsen, the base commander, entered the hangar, his presence silencing the remaining murmurs. He was a stern man, his uniform immaculate, his face a mask of authority. He looked at the screen displaying the list of failed attempts, and his lips thinned into a line of disapproval. "Sergeant," he said, his voice low but carrying across the room. What is the meaning of this? Not a single pilot has managed to last longer than 3 minutes. The scenario is tough, sir, Griggs said, sweating under the colonel's gaze. It's a new protocol. Maximum threat. This is not a test of the protocol, Sergeant. It's a test of my pilots. And they are failing, Madsen said, his eyes scanning the remaining names on the list. He paused at the last one. Vance. Who is Vance? Griggs gestured with his chin toward Alara. Transferred in for research, sir. From a logistics command. Been on a desk for years. I'd wager. Madsen's gaze fell upon Alara. He saw what the others saw. A middle-aged woman in a flight suit that seemed a size too big. A quiet figure who seemed out of place. He saw a problem of bureaucracy, an administrative checkbox to be ticked. He sighed. Get it over with finally. It was her turn. Alara stood, her movements fluid and unhurried. As she approached Simulator 7, she ran her hand lightly along its flank, a gesture of respect, of introduction. The others watched, some with pity, some with morbid curiosity. Private Chun, a young avionics tech who had been silently monitoring the diagnostics, noticed the gesture. He saw the way her fingers traced the seam, as if listening to the machine. He had never seen a pilot do that before. Griggs stood by the simulator door. All right, Vance. The objective is to survive. That's it. Don't try to be a hero. Just keep the plane in the air. Alara looked at him, her eyes clear and steady. I understand the objective, she said. Her voice was calm, lower than they expected, with a resonance that seemed to absorb the ambient noise. She climbed into the cockpit. The canopy hissed shut, sealing her in a world of screens and switches. For a moment, she did not move. She placed her gloved hands on the throttle and stick, closing her eyes. The low hum of the hydraulics and the soft whir of the cooling fans were a familiar symphony. This was home. She was not Alara Vance, logistics officer. Not anymore. In the silent sanctuary of the cockpit, she was Spectre. She breathed in, then out. The memories flooded back not as trauma, but as data. The sting of sand in a desert wind. The biting cold at 30,000 feet. The faces of her team, ghosts who lived in the silence between heartbeats. On the outside, Colonel Madsen tapped his foot impatiently. Reyes whispered to his friend, she's probably trying to remember how to turn it on. Then, on the main screen, the simulation began. The world outside the canopy of Simulator 7 resolved into a photorealistic mountain pass at dusk. The threat icons bloomed on her tactical display like deadly flowers. For hostile aircraft, 2 ahead, 2 flanking. Multiple SAM sites hidden in the valleys below. The comms crackled with simulated enemy chatter. The room watched, expecting a swift, inevitable failure. What they saw instead was something that defied their understanding of aviation. Alara didn't charge forward like Reyes. She didn't climb for altitude like the others. Instead, she dropped. She pushed the nose down, plummeting toward the canyon floor, her velocity indicator climbing rapidly. An audible gasp went through the room. What is she doing? Reyes muttered. She's going to crash. She's mask flying, Private Chin whispered, his eyes glued to the screen. Using the terrain to block their radar, she flew with a terrifying grace. The F-35, a machine of brute force in the hands of others, became an extension of her will, a scalpel in the hands of surgeon. She wasn't fighting the terrain, she was dancing with it. She skimmed the canyon walls, her wingtips mere feet from the rock, using the natural curvature of the earth to remain unseen. The hostile fighters, expecting a high-altitude engagement, flew past her position, their radar sweeps finding nothing. Griggs stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. He had designed the scenario. He knew its triggers, its traps. She was dismantling it, piece by piece, in ways he had never conceived. She's flying it manually, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. No autopilot. Look at her energy management. She wasn't wasting a single ounce of fuel, a single knot of airspeed. Every move was deliberate, efficient, deadly. Emerging from the canyon behind the enemy formation, she was the ghost in their machine. She didn't fire a missile. She selected her gun. A ripple of disbelief went through the observers. A gun run was suicide in modern combat, but she wasn't engaging from a distance. She closed to within 500 meters of the trailing bogey, positioning herself perfectly in its blind spot. A short, controlled burst from the cannon. On the screen, the enemy icon flashed red, then disappeared. Tango 1 down. Her voice said over the speakers, as calm as if she were ordering coffee. She repeated the maneuver on the second fighter, a swift, brutal execution before the pilot even knew he was under attack. Tango 2 down. The remaining 2 enemy pilots, now alerted, broke hard, trying to locate her. But she was already gone, diving back into the shadows of the canyons, the passive sensors of her aircraft drinking in their data, while she remained electronically silent. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Reyes said, his arrogance completely stripped away, replaced by awe. "No one flies like that." Colonel Madsen said nothing. He simply watched, his expression unreadable, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He had seen thousands of pilots in his career, from green recruits to seasoned aces. He had never seen this. This was not piloting. It was an art form. The SAM sites were next. They were the element that had downed every other pilot. Their radar was sophisticated, their missiles fast. Alara approached them indirectly, using a narrow ravine to shield her approach until the last possible second. She popped up, fired 2 guided bombs, and then pulled the aircraft into a maneuver that seemed to defy physics. She performed a high-G barrel roll, deploying flares and chaff, not as a panic measure, but with the precision of a choreographer, each countermeasure released at the exact millisecond needed to decoy the incoming missiles. The missiles, confused by the ghost signals and the extreme maneuver, lost their lock and detonated harmlessly against a cliff face. All ground threats neutralized, her voice reported. She had cleared the entire scenario in under 4 minutes. Not just survived, dominated. But Griggs knew there was a final stage. The no-win scenario. A hidden wave of 6 more advanced fighters programmed to appear on the pilot's 6. A final, overwhelming surprise attack. As the new threat icons appeared, a collective groan went through the hangar. This was the unfair part. The checkmate. "It's over," Reyes said quietly. "There's no way out of that." Alara did not try to run. She did not try to turn and fight. Instead, she did something that made Colonel Madsen's eyes go wide. She cut her engine. For a terrifying second, the only sound from the simulator was the whistle of the wind over the canopy. The F-35 became a glider, its forward momentum bleeding away. The pursuing aircraft, expecting a high-speed chase, overshot her position. As they screamed past, she reignited the engine with a practiced flick of a switch, the turbine roaring back to life. She was now behind them, in the heart of their formation. It was a move of such audacious, suicidal brilliance that no one had ever dared to attempt it, even in simulation. She fired all her remaining missiles in a single, coordinated salvo. "Fox 3, ripple fire," she stated. The screen blossomed with red X's. For more hostiles gone. The final 2 broke, scrambling, but it was too late. She dispatched them with the cold, methodical precision she had shown from the beginning. Silence. The simulation ended. The main screen flashed the results. Mission score, 100%. Threats neutralized, December 12th. Aircraft, intact. Survival probability, 100%. A perfect score, something the system's designers had considered a theoretical impossibility. The canopy of Simulator 7 hissed open. Alara swung her legs over the side and dropped to the floor. She was breathing evenly, her face calm. She looked like a woman who had just finished a crossword puzzle, not a pilot who had just rewritten the rules of aerial combat. The hangar was utterly silent. The cocksure lieutenants, the cynical instructor, the stern colonel. They all stared at her, as if she were an alien. They had seen the data on the screen, but their minds could not reconcile it with the quiet, middle-aged woman standing before them. Griggs looked like he had seen a ghost. His face was pale, his own expertise rendered meaningless. Reyes looked down at his own hands, then back at her, a profound and humbling understanding dawning in his eyes. Colonel Madsen was the first to move. He walked toward her, his stride no longer stiff with authority, but hesitant with something else. Respect. Awe. He opened his mouth to speak, to ask the question that was burning in every mind in the room. Who are you? But he never got the chance. An aide, a young captain from the command center, burst into the hangar, his face pale with panic. He ran past the simulators, his eyes wide, scanning the room. Colonel Madsen, sir, he gasped, skidding to a halt. Urgent communication. I need to find. His eyes landed on Alara. He stopped, his expression shifting from panic to utter confusion. Mom. Madsen stepped forward, annoyed at the interruption. What is it, Captain? I am in the middle of a debriefing. The captain ignored him, his entire focus on Alara. Sir, Colonel, the call is for her. He pointed a trembling finger at Vance. A wave of disbelief rippled through the hangar. A call? For her? Here? Secure line 1, sir. The aide stammered, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It's the White House Situation Room. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier and more profound than any that had come before. Every eye in the room swiveled from the aide to Alara. She showed no reaction. No surprise, no alarm. Just a quiet acceptance, as if she had been expecting it. She gave a small nod and walked toward the secure communications console in the corner of the hangar, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Colonel Madsen followed her, his mind reeling. The White House? For this woman? Who is she? Alara picked up the secure handset, her movements economical and sure. She turned her back slightly to the room, affording herself a small measure of privacy. Madsen stood a few feet away, close enough to hear her side of the conversation, his military discipline warring with his insatiable curiosity. Vance here, she said simply. A pause. Her posture straightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, Mr. President. The two words fell into the silence of the hangar like stones into a deep well. Colonel Madsen felt a cold shock travel down his spine. He fought the urge to take a step back. The President. He was listening to a conversation with the President of the United States. Griggs looked physically ill. Reyes's jaw was slack. They were not just in the presence of a skilled pilot. They were in the presence of something else entirely. I understand the situation, Alara continued, her voice still impossibly calm. They're trying to activate the Ghost Protocol? She listened again, her eyes distant, seeing something far beyond the hangar walls. Yes, sir, I'm familiar with it. I designed it. Madsen felt the floor shift beneath him. Ghost Protocol was a myth, a whisper in the highest echelons of the intelligence community. A doomsday contingency so secret that most five-star generals weren't even aware of its existence. And this woman, this quiet logistics officer, had designed it. The override code is Valkyrie's Dawn, she said, her voice sharp and clear. Repeat, Valkyrie's Dawn. No, sir, they won't find the payload. It's shielded with a plasma field keyed to a quantum signature. They don't have the technology to even detect it. She paused, listening intently. A flicker of something, not sadness, but a deep, abiding memory, crossed her face. Yes, sir. Tell General Marcus that Spectre is active. He'll know what it means, Spectre. The name echoed in the depths of Madsen's memory. Not a protocol, but a person. A legend from the blackest of Black Ops. A solo operative who had handled missions so sensitive they were never recorded, only rumored. An agent who had supposedly died years ago in the Hindu Kush. Spectre. He was standing right next to her. I'll be there in 3 hours, she finished. Yes, sir. Understood. She placed the handset back in its cradle with a soft click. The sound was like a thunderclap in the silent room. She turned around. Her eyes, which had seemed weary and distant before, were now alight with a purpose that was terrifying and magnificent to behold. The room had forgotten how to breathe. She looked directly at Colonel Madsen. The quiet, unassuming woman was gone. In her place was an authority that dwarfed his own rank, that dwarfed everyone's rank. Colonel, she said, and it was not a request. It was a command. I need priority transport to Andrews Air Force Base. Wheels up in 10 minutes. Madsen, A man who commanded a wing of the most advanced fighter aircraft on the planet, a man who answered only to generals, found himself snapping to attention. Yes, yes, ma'am, he stammered, the honorific leaving his lips before he could stop it. Right away. Anything you need. He turned and barked orders at the stunned aide, his voice filled with an urgency that had not been there moments before. Alara Vance, Spectre, walked away. She did not look at the faces of the young pilots who now stared at her with a mixture of fear and profound reverence. She did not look at Sergeant Griggs, who was leaning against a simulator as if his legs could no longer support him. She did not offer a word of explanation or farewell. Her work here was done. As she strode toward the hangar door, the harsh sunlight silhouetting her frame, her sleeve slid up her forearm just enough to reveal a tattoo that had been hidden before. It was a bird of prey, an osprey, rendered in stark black ink. Beneath its piercing eye was a single black teardrop, the symbol of Spectre. Private Chin saw it. He would remember it for the rest of his life. Outside, the roar of a helicopter grew, descending rapidly toward the tarmac. It was not a standard transport. It was a sleek, black pave hawk, the kind used by Special Operations Forces. Alara did not break her stride. She walked into the blinding light and the swirling dust, a silent figure moving toward her next mission, leaving behind a hangar full of men whose world had been irrevocably altered. They were left with the silence, the lingering hum of the machines, and the impossible score still glowing on the main screen. Mission complete. Lieutenant Reyes finally found his voice, a quiet, humbled whisper to no one in particular. They called her useless. He shook his head slowly, watching the black helicopter lift off and disappear into the vast blue sky. My God, we were fools.